Welcome back, Visions fans. Ready Player Will here. I know we're halfway through the Trial of Reckoning event going on this week, which is shorter than normal. So, in the interest of maximizing your time, your energy, your resources, I want to make this video of how I typically plan out how to maximize my score on each of the stages. And hopefully, this is helpful for all of you as well in the interest of time and resources. So, essentially, first thing you absolutely need 100%, this website, WOTV-calc.com, is monumental to enhancing your game experience. If you don't already know about it, you absolutely must favorite it and visit it and get to know it very well. It's basically a database of everything. It's got units, vision cards, espers, all the information about them. And one of the more underrated features about it does have this section called quests, where it has all the maps and enemy info on certain hard stages, brutal stages, guild wars, you name it. It's almost positive likely here. So this week, Trials of Reckoning quest, unfortunately, because they are always named the same thing in every Trials of Reckoning quest, if you were to type in Trials here, as you scroll, you will notice there's a lot of repeats. And essentially, today I'm going to go over one stage in particular. I'm not going to do it in-game, but I'm going to go over the theory of how to do it. Normal number 2. And so, essentially, if you were to type in, trials here, you want to find normal number 2. And once we scroll down, here we go. But you can see there's 6 or 7 of them. It's because it's always named the same thing in every event, but they are sorted in oldest to newest. So the one at the bottom here, where my cursor is our current Trials of Reckoning quest, that if you click into it, Trials of Reckoning quest number 2, it's got all the information about the stages, the rewards, it's that. It's got a map overview, which you may have seen me use as some of my map analyses when I do Guild War tier rankings, but it's also got all the information about the mobs that appear here, their placements, and then their stats. So you can see monumentally important to have access to this to save some time compared to being in the game, seeing where they are, going in on them, looking at the resistance menus. Way too much time for tinkering overall. So the things you're going to need to essentially plan is I use Microsoft Excel, but theoretically you could use anything, but I think Excel is the easiest. And then B, there is a software. I would Google it if you don't already have it installed default. It comes with Windows as far as I know. It's called the Snipping Tool. It's not some crazy software, but the Snipping Tool essentially allows you to click and drag on the screen to copy something and paste it wherever you want. So what we're basically going to do is we're going to create a map and we're going to strategize how best to maximize our points. So if we go back to our WTV calc page here, I'm going to copy and paste this map at a high level, and I'm going to paste it in here. And so what you're seeing on my Excel sheet so far, this whole highlighted area, just some of the preparation you probably want to do. So I have listed here the bonus units and their bonus amounts. I stopped at medium because of the small units, not much to be gained from them. And then basically the same concept here for the vision cards for what their bonuses are. And then the same exact thing that I just did with this page, I did the same thing with these character images. So if you go to, WOTV Calc, you can, really doesn't matter what image you pick as long as it's just a graphical image, just to help visualize it. Click and drag, copy and paste a portrait, and I have them all pasted in here. And once you have this highlighted part set up, you can basically do the same thing for every stage, rinse and repeat, super easy. So if we go back here, taking a step back, I'm going to recopy my map here. I'm going to paste it in, and now I'm essentially going to try to set up the battlefield so I can best strategize how to attack the enemy weaknesses. And primarily, the one thing you always have to do with this is attack the enemy weakness as hard as you can, so both element and attack type, but also you have to take into consideration speed, overkill amount, so there's a whole bunch extra that goes into the thought process than just this, but this is a great starting point. So Ogre, I'm going to do the same thing I just did with some of the character images. I'm going to just do this little guy, and the way you want to read this, see this ID of E1, that's basically their identifiers. So you can see on the map, E1 is where they start out. So you'll see why this all makes sense in a second here. I'm going to put their portraits, so E1, E2, and E3. And then if you're looking at this map, all these other little numbers that are here is the height of the map. So also really important because that'll help you know whether people can walk there or not. So the second person, we got the Lamia here. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just take an image of the portrait. And they are E4 and E5. And then we're going to do the same thing here lastly with the Marlboro. E6. And now I'm going to list them out. So in this case, they all are identical mobs. So it's really just 3 types of enemies. And we're going to look at what their weaknesses are. So if you go into the Ogre, this drop-down menu, you can see they're 10% weak to light, as well as 10% weak to pierce. So light and pierce are what you are going to want to target. The Lamia, if we do the same thing here, is weak to dark and magic. So dark and magic. And then finally, the Marlboro is weak to ice and weak to magic. So now this is where, unfortunately, the knowledge of the game and how well you know the characters is going to be extremely handy. So this is why this website is particularly important, to get to know the characters better if you don't already do so. So if you're looking at the Ogre, Light and Pierce, you got to think, okay, which of the bonus characters can I tap into to access both of those, ideally, but one of them in a perfect world? And I know for a fact that Lucio does have an ability that he's a light element unit, and then one of his passives is able to change his Tri-Slasher to Tri-Piercer, so it's Pierce attacks instead. So I know for a fact that who I'm going to use as candidates, Lucio is definitely my number one candidate to try to fit in here, but also good candidates. Kane is known for his Pierce, so at least it's one of them. Cecil's also known for his light. And then technically Joom has Pierce, but I'm going to do my best with these three to try to take out the Ogres. The second one, the Lamia, Dark, and Magic. And so obviously the best candidate here would be Golbez, provided you have the unit. But also if I'm looking at the units, other Dark and Magic units are theoretically Eldyra, but I'm going to put Black Rose Lena, BRH for an acronym, but I'll also throw in Eldyra here as a legitimate Magic user to take advantage of that weakness if you can't get the Dark. And the last one here is Ice and Magic. And if you're looking at the units, the only Ice unit is Rosa. And if we go over here to Rose's page, although she's typically known as an archer, she does have a black mage subjob, so she does have access to magic as well. So theoretically, in a perfect world, Rose would be the number one candidate to take them out. But if not for that, you also want to use, magic users. So in this case, I would go Golbez, Black Rose Lena, or Eldyra again. So now that I've kind of identified who are the characters that I'm going to try to use to take out the stage, this is where you're going to want to use these character models to essentially place them. So I know these three ogres kind of clustered here on the top left of the map. Lucio, Kane, and Cecil are the best units for them, so I'm going to essentially try to place where I think their initial starting places should be, then to help to try to determine their turn order from a high level here. I'm going to probably put Lucio here in this initial slot. I'm probably going to put Cecil here in the number 2 slot, and I'm probably going to try to put Kane here in the number 3 slot. I actually would probably end up moving Kane and switching places here, where I know Lucio does have a passive of move +1, so I think Lucio can probably go 1, 2, 3, 4 straight ahead. And I think Kane, because he has that jump, he can definitely go 1, 2, 3 and attack this boss to start. And then Cecil, if you had a TMR that's move +1, you could essentially get him right up next to the Ogre, but you might want to use a buff instead. And quite honestly, this is the kind of thing where you're talking about agility tuning. You might want to have Cecil go first, use a TMR like his own TMR that's attack and magic buff to maximize the damage, and then he can move here and then attack the Ogre on his second turn. We also need to keep in consideration now that we need to place Golbez. We're probably going to end up using Golbez right about here as close as possible to the Lamia. And if I had to guess, we're going to bring in that bonus unit of Golbez, so you would have 2 of them. And I would imagine you would try to place the other Golbez right here. Don't forget, Black Rose Lena is another great candidate, so if you're talking about her placement, this is where some judgment calls whether you put her here and attempt to take out the Lamias too, or whether or not you switch her spots to Golbez. But then, ideally, I think you'd probably want to leave this P2 slot open for Rosa here. I'm likely going to put her right here just for the sake of being able to probably shoot this Marlboro on turn 1. Obviously, you want to maximize the damage if possible. And at this point, I've kind of got a basic idea of initial placement. I know that I'm maximizing my bonus units. I'm going to be able to, just put the vision cards on however I can possible. The agility in terms of turn order is something you're obviously going to want to play with just to make sure that you don't have any wasted turns. So as far as that goes, that's something you probably do want to tinker more in game. But by at least starting off with this, you'd already know for a fact who you need, rough idea of where you probably want to place them, what the enemies are weak to. So you've essentially cut out a bunch of the initial research that you're going to have to do, and quite honestly, you'll hopefully save time on knowing which passives and subjobs you're going to need. Because, for instance, I was talking about Lucio here. You're going to need to have a Pierce type attack, so you already know going into this fight you're going to have to put the Pierce passive on him, which you wouldn't probably know just by going into the battle blind. Obviously this can be very different for everyone here because not everyone has, the top bonus units or all the vision cards, but the concept is still the same. You basically want to take this opportunity and do the same for each stage as you go through it to look at what the units are, what their weaknesses are, and basically get a rough idea of who's going to be best to attack them and where you can basically play with them in order to start the fight. And at that point, that's where you can kind of get into the tweaking of, okay, I can max them for more damage here, or I could use a TMR to give them an extra movement here, or Elvira's a limit break is going to be really potent here because I'm going to be able to get Lucio a turn quicker, which means the battle ends quicker, which means more points. From here, this is where things go a million different ways and where your creativity really kicks in. But I think this is a great foundation to start on each map. And like I said, in terms of starting over, so let's say I finish my normal and I'm fine with the results. Well, in order to go on to the next one, the process is basically the same. You already have your setup right here. But now we're going to go into WOTV Calc. We're going to find Trials of Reckoning normal number 3. It's going to be the most recent one. And then we're going to repeat the process all over again. We're going to take a screenshot of the map. You're going to do the same process of trying to put the enemies down in the proper slots of where they are. And then you're basically going to go through each enemy and identify their weaknesses and try to initially position who you're going to bring, where you're going to put them, and what the turn order and essentially layout might be. But that's it in a nutshell. Hopefully this was informative. We're on a tight schedule because of the shortened week, so it's in our interest to be able to be as efficient as possible. And although this might seem like overkill, it really doesn't take that long to set up, maybe 10-15 minutes. And then you're going to save yourself a lot of time as well. So whatever time you think it might take to set this up, I guarantee you're saving time in the broad scheme of things when you're trying to maximize your points. So thanks for watching. I'll talk to y'all soon, and good luck reaching your high scores.